What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be building a full project in Databricks. Now, within this entire Databricks series, we've learned a lot of things, and we're going to apply all of that into our final project. If you've never done one of my projects on this channel before, they can be a little bit long because I leave everything in. I don't cut out a lot of stuff. So if I make mistakes, you're going to see it so that you can learn from it as well. I will leave a link in the description so you can go to the Databricks free edition and create an account so you can follow along with this project. I will also have the dataset that we're going to be using in a GitHub. So all you have to do is go and download that dataset and you can import it and use it just like I'm doing. We are going to be working with real raw data, so we are going to encounter some issues and some things that we'll have to clean up along the way, but we're going to learn a lot, and this is what we're going to end up with at the final project. We're creating this United States emissions breakdown dashboard. It's going to be an awesome project, so I cannot wait to do this with you. Let's go ahead and jump onto my screen and get started. Now, before we jump into Databricks and actually start building out our project, I want to take a look at the data because there's a lot of data here. And when I say a lot, I mean, there's only 3,000 rows, but there's a ton of different fields. So if we start scrolling over, we're gonna see there's so many different things that we can work on. And I don't wanna focus on everything because it's gonna be impossible to get everything in there. I have highlighted with yellow the ones that we're gonna be working with. This is the emissions for megatons of CO2. We have our population, latitude, longitude, the county name, county state name, and state abbreviation. We're gonna be focusing on emissions, although there's so many other things we could look at in this data set, but we just don't have that much time and we don't have, days and weeks to comb through this and build everything out for, all the different scenarios and dashboards that we could build out. So this is the data set that we're going to be working with. Again, you can get that in the GitHub. Let's get out of this. And what we're gonna do is I'm right here. We are in our Databricks free edition account. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a new catalog. So I'm gonna call this one, I'm gonna say this is our emissions catalog. I'm gonna go ahead and create this. And now we're gonna have, let's get out of this. We're gonna have our emissions. And I'm gonna go under my default and I'm gonna come right over here and I'm gonna create a table. So we're gonna drop this entire thing into this. Let's go ahead and browse. And we're gonna come up here to emissions data 2023. Now, this data is large, may take just a second to bring it all in, but it's not like 10 gigabytes or anything. So we should be able to create this quite well. I'm gonna rename this to just emissions data because I think it looks cleaner. You can keep the 2023 if you would like, but I'm just gonna take emissions data. All right, so our data is in here. This all looks good. We are not gonna transform any of this, although we may need to transform some of it, right? But it's going to auto detect all of our data types. So, if we need to change something, we're gonna do that after the fact. We're gonna take it as it is with the raw data. Now, all we have to do is come down here to create table, and it's going to create our emissions data table for us. Now it's gonna give us some of this AI suggested description. This looks good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and just accept this just to have it in this data set, which is nice to have. Now, what I'm going to do is just give you the scenario, right? You were hired by the EPA to create a dashboard and they want to focus specifically on emissions, but they want a breakdown of things like where it's actually coming from in the United States, where the most emissions are coming from. They want to see what states and counties are emitting the most emissions, as well as just in general, as a population, how much emissions do we have per person per area? So these are things that we're going to have to dive into. We're going to write some SQL queries in order to do this. Let's come over here and let's go to our SQL editor. Now this is from a previous lesson. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of all these previous queries and we're gonna get started just with a fresh new query. And we will do this by selecting emissions and going to default. And it should be our emissions underscore data. Let's go ahead and run this. Now as our dashboard, that's gonna be kind of our final product that we're gonna hand off, I want to start with our location data because I personally am super interested in this. We of course have the state name and the county name, but it's not going to be as specific as something like latitude and longitude. And so I want to use this data along with our emissions data, and let's come right over here and find that. It's right here. So it's GHG emissions M tons CO2E. It's a long name, but that is the column that we want. So let's come right here. And instead of getting taking all the data, I'm going to do latitude. I'm going to do tab to autocomplete. We're going to do longitude. And let's see if it can find the CO2. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit tab. And I'm just going to call this as emissions. I feel like that's just going to be easier. Let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. Now, in terms of actually analyzing this data, latitude and longitude tends to be a little bit more difficult to work with in something like a county or a state because it is so specific. So you can't really aggregate on it. It's more of a visual thing. So let's actually just take this over. I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to bring this over to my dashboard, and we're going to create our new dashboard. Let's rename it really quickly before we get into data. I'm going to call this our emissions dashboard. As we build things out, we will then come and add to it. We don't have to do it that way. We could get all the data up front and then go from there. But I'm going to create from SQL, and I'm going to run this. And we actually need to specify where this is coming from. So let me get rid of this. I'm going to call this emissions.default emissions data. So I was just tabbing there. It got our catalog, then our schema, and then our table. And I just tabbed along the way. It makes it, kind of easy to work with. Let's go ahead and run this. And now we have our data right down here. Now, like I said, this isn't the easiest data to work with if you don't really know latitude and longitude data, but it's really easy to visualize. So let's come up here and we are going to add, I'm going to get rid of our filters, but I'm going to add a visualization. And the data that we'll connect with is apparently called our untitled data set. Let me change this. So I'm going to rename this as our location data. We will use some other location data, but it's like state and county, and so we should be good. Well, let's use our location data. And what we need is actually a map. And we didn't do a map when we were creating and building dashboards in a previous lesson. So this is a new one for us. But let's come right down here. We're going to go to a point map. Now you can see we already have the coordinates available for us, longitude and latitude. So this should be really easy. We're just going to do for the longitude, we'll do longitude. And for the latitude, believe it or not, this is going to sound insane, we're going to do latitude. Now, this is a little tricky to work with sometimes. It's kind of a double click. So I'm going to double click in, I'm going to double click in, and you can kind of scroll back. There are some things that we need to customize because this is just super blurry. I'm going to go to the size and I'm going to decrease the size a little bit. I think that makes it a lot better. We can always, double click and zoom out just a little, just to have enough. I will say if we zoom out more, you'll see some information right here. I think this is Hawaii. Don't cancel me if I'm wrong about that. Geography is not my best area. Then we have Alaska up here. So maybe we want to include all of that. That would be fine if we do. But I'm going to come right in here. I think this is what I want to keep, which is mainland United States. So we're going to keep this. This to me is really useful. And it makes a lot of sense. This is some of the most densely populated areas over here in the kind of the mid-east and the east. And then right over here, based on emissions, right? Emissions is much lower, even in California. There's a lot of people in California and on the West Coast, but not as many emissions. And so most of our emissions, just looking at our, our visualization, are over here on the right-hand side. Kind of centralized. What is this, like Ohio? Chicago's in Illinois. It's like Illinois, Ohio area. I'm not a geography expert. Don't hate. I don't know geography that well. So this is really interesting. I would not have guessed this, but this is official EPA data. So this is, pretty useful. Now, real quick, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to create our title. We're going to call this the United States Emissions Breakdown. And I need to spell this properly. Let's put this in the middle. Let's make it bold, and we'll make it larger. We're not going to get crazy with it. Maybe we'll do one more. Let me see. That's too big. All right, let's go back to 24. Underneath it, though, I'm going to add some notes. We'll make it a lot smaller. We'll say this data was collected by the EPA. I'm going to say environmental. It's always tough to watch people watch me spell, by the way. I'm not good at it. Environmental Protection Agency. And then I'm going to say in 2023. I think this is fine for now. If we want to add something later to it, we can, or make it larger, or whatever we want to do. But I'm going to keep it just like this for now. Actually, I think I do want to make this bigger, or this part at least bigger. It seems like it should be. I feel like it should be bigger. That just feels better. I don't know why. Don't get onto me. Now, we can add more visualizations to this, and of course we will, but the first one, this one is probably the easiest one because we're not really digging into the data itself. We're more just trying to visualize it because latitude and longitude data is, pretty specific. Now let's come back over here to our SQL editor. I'm going to try using some AI here on this next one because the next one's going to be a little bit trickier, I think. Let's just create a new query because I think that's perfectly fine. But I want to make sure it's in the right schema. It is not. Let's go to emissions. Let's go to default. In fact, I could have just copied this over, honestly. So I'm going to come over here. Let's paste this in here. Now I'm going to edit this. I now want to focus on a new thing that we're looking at. I want to take a look at some data. Now I'm going to do this because this is what I personally do. I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to bring it back to the catalog and go to emissions, go to default, go to emissions data, and look at the sample data. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to just one click over, take a look at my raw data. You can also just create a query and tab over, but then I don't know. That's not my workflow. I like having a different thing for it. You can do that if you'd like. Just do, select everything from emissions data. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to use the AI, and what we're going to be looking at is I want to take a look at this county name as well as the population. So for each county, so this is in Alabama. This is the county state name in Alabama. I want to look for this county and this population. Let's take a look at our emissions. But more specifically, I want to take a look at the emissions per person. So we're going to have to do a calculation here. So I'm going to ask the AI, I'm going to say, I want to look at the emissions per person in each county. Let's go ahead and generate this. Let's see if it will get exactly what I want. It may or may not. And let's accept this. I'm just going to hit tab. So we're casting this as a double, and then we're casting the population as a double, and then we're saying that's the emissions per person. Now this theoretically should work, right? But let's go over to our GHG emissions right here. Now here's the thing, and this is not, a Databricks specific thing, but this happens all the time in almost any platform, this is a number. This is 100% a number, has a comma in there, should be rendered as a number. But you can see right here, I can just tell you right now, this query is going to fail because it needs to be changed. Let's go ahead and try to run this. Now, the reason why this is going to fail is because this is a string, right? We have letters, we have characters that are not numeric in this column, and that is an issue. And so what we need to do is we need to convert this, or we can also in here ask it to diagnose this error. I'm going to see if the assistant can do it for us, because if it can, then that would be fantastic. Let's see if it's able to do this. This is kind of a specific fix. It needs to look into the data. And it looks like it got it perfect. It said you need to remove the thousands separator before you cast it. This looks excellent. Let's actually replace this. Let's get rid of that. And now let's try running this. And wait a second. We have latitude and longitude here. Let's go back, because I didn't want latitude and longitude in the first place. I was just looking at this and I got mixed up. Okay, that's fine. We'll keep this. But I am, before we even run this, I am going to say I don't want latitude. Did I spell it right? In longitude, I want the county and the population for those columns. I'm just using AI here. I could just fix this myself. I just want to test it because I think it's, an interesting thing. All right, let's accept this and let's go ahead and try running it and see what happens. All right, we're running into some issues, and I'm just going to tell you that's going to happen, and that's okay. Let's take a look. I don't think we even have a county column. Let's go right over here. We have a county name column, which actually should be fine since we're not grouping on anything, but I actually want this column right here. So I'm going to copy this as the column name, and we'll come right back here. Population should be correct. And then we're working with a replace. I believe that we need backticks for this and not brackets. Let's just go ahead and try that and let's run it. All right, now this is working. Listen, AI is not perfect. Sometimes we got to step in and do what we do. So this looks correct to me. Let's take a look just really quick because we are breaking it down by the county state name, which is what I would do. I wouldn't want to use this county name because what if we have another county name that's Baldwin County, right? And when we start trying to visualize this data, then that could be issues because it's going to probably try to group that data and it'll cause issues. Now, what we're going to do with this is we're actually going to look at the top 10 emissions based off of probably the emissions per person. I think that's all we should do. So I'm just going to add it this time. I'm not going to ask the AI. So I'm just going to say order by, and then I'm going to say emissions per person, and we'll do descending. And this should be really, actually, I should limit it by like 10 or something. I'm going to say limit 10. There we go. Now let's run this. And I'm super interested. This is real data, so, I'm really curious. So emissions per person. The population is only 5,000. They have a lot of emissions. That's in New England. This is in North Dakota, New England, North Dakota. Very interesting. So based off the emissions per person, these are the places, and this is not what I would have guessed. I would have guessed like New York or, I don't know, North Carolina or something like that. But we got New England and North Dakota. And then I think MO is Missouri. Don't quote me on that. But this looks good to me. This query was a little bit more challenging than our last one. I think you would agree. Let's bring this over. We're going to go back to our dashboard. I could also make this another tab. And it looks like that reset. We'll do that at the end. We'll just place that how we want it at the end. Now, what we actually need to do is put this in our data. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to place this in there. Again, it's not, it's right here, the emissions. We can change this so we don't have to do that. Let's go ahead and run this. And our data is working. Even though it's underlined, it's still reading it in fine. We do have it correctly done. We can always, like we did before, do emissions, and it shouldn't say emissions underscore data, emissions.default.emissions data. Just to get rid of those red lines, we can do that. Now we have our data down here. This is really useful. We don't necessarily have to even use this column, but we do have the population for emissions. And let's get rid of our limit because I want to make a specific type of visualization with this. It's a scatter plot. Scatter plots are really great because we're going to be able to use the population and the emissions per person on a scatter plot and kind of take a look. Hey, as the population increases, does the emissions per person increase as well, or does it decrease? A scatter plot would be great for this. Let's call this, let's do emissions per person. That's what we're going to call this one. Let's come over here and we're going to come in and we're going to choose our emissions per person. Now, on our x-axis, we can choose the emissions per person. We can switch this around, see which one works better. Then we'll also choose the population. Let's scroll down a little bit. Now, we need to change this from a bar chart because that does not look right. We're going to change this into a scatter plot. Now, for the scatter plot, we want the raw data. We don't want any aggregations. So let's say none here. And for the sum of population, none as well. That should be good. We can also really quick change the size because it's a little blurry. I want to see a little bit more granular of what we're looking at. We have this one up here. This emissions per person is 0.5. Okay, so that's low, but the population is 10 million. I'm curious where this actually is. Let's come down here to the tooltip. Let's add in the county state name. So now when I hover over it, and it's so small, now when I hover over it, this is Los Angeles County. This is actually really good. There is a very low emissions for that amount of people. And you can see that because it's over on this left-hand side. If we had something over here, this is not going to be good. This is one of our New England ones. They have emissions per person of 5.95, and that's in, I think, megatons. So that's a lot of emissions. Their population is 5.16 thousand. That's not a lot. That's a little over 5,000. They have a lot of emissions. So as you can see, the areas that actually have a higher population tend to have less emissions. Overall, I mean, these are Cook County, Harris County in Texas, Maricopa County in Arizona. But a lot of these ones are actually fairly low per person. In the areas that don't have a lot of people, they actually tend to look like they have higher emissions for the lower population. I mean, some, of course, are over here with very low emissions per person. It's just really interesting. I'm kind of looking into this as we go. Let's add this title. We'll say emissions per person. We'll say emissions versus population. And we could add some type of description. We don't have to, but I'm just going to say higher populations tend to have lower emissions per person. And we could go more in depth and add more notes that would be useful, but we're not going to. But I think that's really interesting. I'm kind of fascinated by that myself. So we have this emissions versus population one. Really quick, I'm going to add a title to this one. I'm going to say emissions per location. I'm just going to keep it like that. I think that's perfectly fine. Let's scroll down really quick. We're going to add in some more visualizations. I'm going to just put these here so that we can scroll down a little easier. But now we have these ones in here with us. Let's come back to our SQL editor and let's add a new tab. So I'm going to say a new query here. Now what I want to look at is the total emissions by state. Because I want to see what states are just doing the worst. They have so many emissions. They're the top 10 worst states in America. I wouldn't say that. That's a bit extreme. We will need to reuse this really quick. We're going to have to reuse this replace. I'll just copy this over. In fact, I feel like I can write this quite quickly if we were in the emissions default here. What we need to do is we need to come over here and let's see. So I don't want to have to take this and break it out by the state over here. We have the state abbreviation. So let's use it. Let's copy this column name. Let's bring it back. And all we're going to do is just keep the state abbreviation. We don't need to do any of these calculations. We should be able to get rid of all of that. And let me see what I'm doing wrong here. Okay, it looks like I have an extra parentheses. And then we're just going to say total emissions. That should be fine. Then we need to group by. So we're going to say group by because if we look at our data, we have a lot in Alabama, right? We have a lot of counties in each state. So we have to group on this state abbreviation. And then I'm not going to go over to it, but then we're going to group and do our sum right here, right? And we're going to have to actually do the sum in just a second. So we're going to say group by the state abbreviation. And there we go. And we'll take this. And then right up here, we just need to do the sum. So I actually did need that extra parentheses. I got rid of it. I was so short-sighted. I got too excited. And we'll keep the top 10 actually, because I know that when we start visualizing this, we're not going to need all of them. Although it would be, let me just comment this out for a second, because I am curious to look at all the states and see which one has the highest. So the total emissions is Texas, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, Georgia. That's a lot of the South and Southeast and not a lot from the West Coast. Let's come down here. We have Vermont, Richmond, AK, is that Arkansas? DC, ME, Maine. So actually some of the Northeast is actually quite good with New Hampshire. But then the West Coast and kind of the Midwest tends to be really low emissions, probably because their populations are lower, but I guess maybe not because of what we looked at earlier. Anyways, let's limit this by 10. And then I'm going to copy this over. Yeah, we'll go back to our dashboards. Let me go back to the emissions dashboard. Let's scroll down. And actually, we got to go to the data first. Let's create this and we'll run this. I need to have our emissions and our default. That should be good. Let's run this data and then I'm going to rename this. I'm going to say total emissions per state. That should be good. So now we have these. These are our top 10. What I actually want to look at this for is percentage-wise. We're going to have to do some other analysis because I do want to add something that you can't necessarily visualize. We're just going to have to dig into that in the data really quickly and perform a little calculation. It's nothing crazy. But we may use AI for it. We'll see if it can work for us. We'll do total emissions by state. And we're going to do a pie chart right here. Now for the angle, all we have to do is the total emissions, but we want to break it out. Our color, we want to break it out by these state abbreviations. We definitely need to add the labels here. Let's add our labels. There we go. And it has it over there. So we have this little legend right down here. We have Texas, that's 20% in the top 10. That's in our top 10. These are the total emissions. If we tried to add all of them, which, you know what? Let's just go try it. We can get rid of these 10. We can do that. Let's run this. We'll have all of our data. Let's go back to our dashboard. And now we have all of them. So it looks like Texas is 10%, but that is a lot, right? We have a lot of different colors and it's really hard to see almost anything, if I'm being honest. If we want to, and maybe this is a good thing to do, is we can add a filter right here. And I haven't done this at all in this video yet, but I'm just gonna say maybe a range slider might be good. For the field, we can do, let's see, total emissions per state. We'll look at the total emissions. And let's see if I can just kind of scroll up and do something like this. That might work. But then again, it's then, only doing the calculation or the percentage based off of that. So we're just reinventing the wheel here. I'm just demonstrating it can be done, but I don't think we need this. All that being said, we're actually going to delete that. But that's okay. Let's go back. We're going to add the limit 10. Listen, I'm here for education purposes, right? I want you to know what you can do. If you want to do that, you can, but we're not going to do it. Let's go back here. Now we have this. This looks good, but I don't like this title. Actually, let's get right here. I'm just going to say emissions percentage or something like that is fine. Feel like that's good enough for like a title even. We can, and I think we should, come in here and add some type of description, some information here. So I'm just going to say the top 10 states account for X amount of emissions for all of the US. Now I'm saying X amount because we don't have that information yet. We actually need to write that query. Let's go back to our SQL editor and let's dig into this. I'm going to try to use this assistant because I feel like it might be able to understand what I'm doing. I'm going to paste this in and I'm just going to say, I want to know what percentage, I need to write this right, but what percentage of emissions are the top 10 states for the whole country? And let's see if it understands that. I don't know if I even wrote that well, but let's see if it did. If it does. This is a CTE it's writing. I'm just going to see what it's writing. It's writing a CTE. It's calculating the top 10, and then it's selecting the sum of the total emissions. Okay, this could work. Let me take this query real quick, and I'm actually going to open up a new tab or a new query. And let's make sure, oops, I need to get all this. Oh, it's doing it for a notebook. That's all right. I'm going to get rid of that because I'm going to come down here to emissions, to default. Let's paste this in here, and this may work. Let's run this. Okay, so this is the top 10 emissions. This is the top 10 percentage. I believe this is correct. You can validate this, but what it's doing is, we don't need this SQL here. What it's doing is creating a CTE, calling it the top 10, Then we're selecting the state abbreviations. We have this query. It's taking the total or the sum for the top 10. And then we're using that later on. So now we're doing select, and this is the sum of the total emissions from up here. And then we're taking the sum of the total emissions divided by this number right here, which is all of them. Now, wait a second. I may be wrong on this because we're only pulling from the top 10. So maybe it's just looking at the total emissions from up here as top 10 emissions. It's taking the sum of the total emissions and then selecting the sum from emissions data. No. You know what? No. It is taking it from. It's doing a subquery in here. I missed that. So this subquery is actually selecting all of the emissions from the emissions data. This is great. I'm going to say it accounts for 51%. This is a great job, AI. I'm glad it did a good job. I think I am going to add, make a duplicate of this. That's my personal workflow, okay? So let's come in here and we're going to say that this accounts for, the top 10 account for 51%. Let's make sure I spell this right. The top 10 states, I'm actually going to say these 10 states. These 10 states account for 51% of all emissions. I'm going to say of, what am I doing? Of all emissions in the US. I'm having a tough time writing. That is a useful statistic. That is a really useful statistic. So I think this one is done. I think this is a really good visualization. Look, pie charts have its place. Percentages like this, I think are really useful. Let's come back. Let's go to our SQL editor. I'm going to have that over here. So I'm going to have my SQL editor, emissions dashboard, and the data. Now, what I want to do is I want to name and shame a little bit, okay? I want to take a look at the county state name. What specific county, and we kind of looked at this earlier when we were getting our population data because we had to ground it with a group by and something, but now we're actually using the county state name. We're going to take a look at the top 10 counties within the US, and we want to create a bar chart for this. So let's use this. Let me come right back here. This was by far the hardest query that we've written today. AI did well. We gave it a lot of the context, but I think it did a good job. Let's bring in some of our previous, this was a really simple thing here. Actually, let's use this because it has a lot of the information we're already wanting. Now, all we're doing is we're just looking at the total emissions, not per person. So let's get rid of this. We're literally just looking at it like this. So we have the county state name. Let's go to emissions default. We have the county state name from emissions data, and we don't have to do this. We need to do it. Let's close this parentheses and call this as total emissions. And then we have to use this alias for this part to order by it down here. We don't have to technically. We could just copy this whole cast and replace, but we're not going to. So now we want to look at the top 10. So this should work. Now we have the county state name in Arizona, Texas, Illinois, Florida. Geez, just so many emissions. Think of the world. Think of your country. Let's come in here. No, we need to go back to the data. Let's create from SQL, and we're going to put this in here. Let's go back to our emissions. Let's run this. This should be good. Awesome. So now we have the highest total emissions right here. I mean, listen, even though Los Angeles County is in the top 10, it's because their population is 4 times as much as some of these. I mean, it's really interesting. That's why we did the emissions per person earlier, because there are outliers and, the total population does matter. Let's come in here and we're just going to rename this county shaming. All right. That's what we're going to call it because that's what we're doing. Let's be honest. All right. We're just going to make a bar chart. We're going to go to the county shaming. We're going to use a bar chart. For our x-axis, let's use total emissions. Then for our y-axis, we can use the county state name. And I do want to look at that from highest to lowest. So let's do it like that. We can change the coloring if you want. I definitely want tooltips, or not tooltips, sorry, labels. I definitely want labels on this. This is just our total emissions in like megatons. So I'm going to say that. I want to add a title. I'm going to say total emissions, I got to spell right, emissions by M ton, I think, of CO2. And I want to make sure that's correct. Because listen, this dashboard, I'm going to send this to the EPA right away. So we have M tons of CO2. Maybe CO2e. I don't know if I should be putting that in here. Let's add that. All right. This looks great. Let's adjust this real quick. I'm actually going to come over this way, double click, come out a little bit. This is something that I just have not gotten the hang of. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but let's click in on this and have that right there. We need to bring back our emissions versus population and bring this up. Now, what did I do here? Oh, I think I might have clicked on, yeah, I zoomed in. Whoops. Don't mind me. Listen, I make mistakes all the time. I want to clean this up just a little bit. Things like the total emissions. I just want to say total emissions, right? I'm cleaning up these X and Y axes. I'm going to call this the county name. Maybe I should say county state name, I guess, to be more accurate. That looks good. Emissions, this one looks good. Here we need, oops, let me zoom out. We need to rename this one, emissions per person. We're going to call this emissions. Oops, did I spell that right? Emissions per person. That does not look right, but maybe it is. And I'm going to change this population to be capitalized. I think it looks better. Population. And let's see, emissions per location. Emissions versus population. I actually should say emissions. Where's the title here? Oh, I got to do it up here. I'm going to say emissions for continental US. Did I spell that right? No. Continental US. My spelling is so terrible. But we're only looking at the continental US here, so that might just be worth noting. We are done. We are done here. We have our United States emissions breakdown, and I think this looks great. We dug into some of the data a little bit deeper than we probably needed to, but I think this was great. And we were able to use AI and build out our dashboard. I am super happy with how this turned out. Remember, this is a real data set. There's so much other data in here. So if you want to, you can use the assistant in here and say, hey, what other things can I look at for emissions? And it'll give you suggestions. But this is what I wanted to build, because I was super interested in it. And emissions is just, something that everybody understands. People are curious about it. And so visualizing it, being able to see it and kind of shame some of these counties that just got so many emissions, but it's worth it. It's worth building it out. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you found this helpful. Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this entire series, and that was Databricks. Databricks has been so awesome to work with because I already love Databricks. It was an easy fit. And what's even better is they have this Databricks free edition. If you have not already, if you just watched through this without following along, create a Databricks free edition account. Go ahead and do that. I will leave a link in the description so you can build something like this completely for free. It is an amazing, amazing deal. With that being said, thank you guys so much for following along through this entire project. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. If you have not already, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.